So, how do you do that? That's just an example of what it looks like in real life, but let's talk about um, what it actually means to do it. Okay. So, one of the things you can use is called an empathy map. All right. And this is pretty simple, actually. So, the way it works is you take, and you could see some pictures there of my wife and I working through that. But what you have is this idea of you break it up into quadrants, and on the left are things that are observable. Okay. So, things that were said, these are quotes, things that people did. Now, for you all, there's a little bit of like fudging that you're going to have to do because you're doing interviews and you're not actually in people's homes. Where what this is used for, so there's kind of a blending of what people said and what they did. I think for you, if they said they did it, you can put it under the do category. But these are all observed things. So quotes would go in the upper left. Things they did: I took my dog for a walk. I, put, like, gave my kid an iPad just to shut him up. I, all these things that are observable, right? And you could, if you had a perfect transcript, you could go back and record it and know that you had, this was true. Where it gets interesting, and where you all are going to kind of make your money as designers, is on the right side. What you then do is think about, like, all right, what, if she said, like, oh, I'm just so sick of this, like, I'm so sick of the teachers not giving lesson assignments. What might she be thinking, right? She might be thinking, well, you know what? Like, I'm not a teacher. Isn't this what I pay teachers to do? Right. Um, and that's kind of maybe something she might not necessarily have articulated, but something that's kind of a intellectual, a reasoning that might be happening, right, for this hypothetical user. Then you think, what might she be feeling, right? She might be feeling frustrated. She might be feeling overwhelmed. She might be feeling like a bad mom, right? There's all sorts of things that are more about what her internal state is and what it feels like from more of an emotional level. So you will never, it's unlikely that someone will tell you, like, and it was just making me feel overwhelmed. Sometimes they may say that, but it's less likely. You're going to have to interpret and infer what's going on the right side of this diagram. Okay. All right. So, and what you want to do is just make sure that you start on the left side. It's much easier, I find, to start on the left side and populate a bunch of concrete things you heard, and then start to make inferences based off those. Okay. So that is it's called an empathy map, and that's something that can help get you away from that kind of literal interpretation towards more of interesting sense-making interpretations. Okay, so there is another way that so that's one tool, empathy map. Another tool is surprises, contradictions, and tensions. And so this is, these are a little trickier to explain, so I'll use a couple of examples. Okay, so surprises. One of the simple ways to know you have a surprise is that, like, the user said blank, and you would never have thought of that before you went out into the field, right? So, example, this was for a project about parks, right? But they use an area of parks, but they said it's best when it's filled with people studying, right? So that's, I would have thought, for me, I like to study in quiet, right? That's kind of surprising, right? So using things that are just surprising to you. Now, the great thing about being in a team is some people are going to be like, oh yeah, that's obvious. Everybody knows that. And it's just your way of seeing the world happens to be different, right? And so you want to just make sure we all have blind spots. And so I think something that it's not surprising to you because you just happen to never kind of pay attention to that kind of thing. So that's where it's good as a team to be like, is this surprising? Is this weird behavior? Is this unusual? So that's one of the areas that you can jot down and just capture what's surprising, right? That can really help you uncover interesting elements of what might be going on for them. Okay. Another thing is contradictions. This will be, again, a little bit trickier for you since you're not going to be with them in person. But it's like, all right, she said that, like, she always limited screen time and would never give them an iPad because it rots their brain. But yet while we were talking, she gave him the iPad, right? So that's like, huh, that's interesting. I wonder what's going on with that, right? So and the idea here is that you're not trying to be like, haha, I gotcha, like you're wrong. What you're trying to do is understand, like, all right, if there's, why are they saying something and yet doing something that seems to contradict it? And you're just using that as a way to get a clue into their potential inner world. Okay. All right. So that's contradictions. And then, and I'll give you an example of that, right? So, whoops, sorry. Here, you're not going to do it, but, whoops. So, no, whatever, I already gave you an example. Okay, and then tensions. This one I really like a lot, where it's like, oh, she had to choose between, like, focusing on working at home or keeping her kid quiet, or she had to focus on, seeming professional at work and, giving her kid the kind of screen-free upbringing that she's heard is so important. So tensions are really helpful because they can often give you a sense of, like, what are some of those trade-offs people are making? And oftentimes this can be a really powerful place to say, like, wow, imagine if she could, like, excel at work while having her kid be, live this screen-free lifestyle. That could be something that's really a tremendous design opportunity, even though it seems hard. How do I do that? Don't worry about it. We don't need to know that now. Okay. All right. So final tool is called what, how, why. And what I want to do is I'll give you an example here. So here is this actual person I ran into. I met her in the airport, and I noticed that, like, there was something surprising. So first, I was kind of surprised. That's why I noticed in the first place. She has an enormous backpack on, right? So think about, like, wow, what is going on, right? And so here, she's got a giant backpack. She's got a baby. Well, you know what? I'm going to cover this in class in real time. So with what, how, why, what you want to do is move from concrete to abstract, okay? And you want to go deep with your why. So what you would say is, like, all right, what's happening? So there is, in this example, there is the mother who's at home on a conference call, right? There's a kid who's kind of in the background. There's it's a shelter-in-place order. It's video conferencing. Those are all things that are happening. Then how are they happening, right? Well, it's kind of hectic. The kids are running around. She seems like kind of frantic, right? She seems stressed out, right? That's sort of the texture of how things are happening. So the what is very concrete, right? There's a mother at home trying to do a conference call for work, and her kid is there, right? That's very neutral. There's lots of ways that could happen, right? But then you're giving texture to it, right? And this is where, one way that could be happening is, like, she is killing it in her meeting and the kid is just, fully absorbed in their math homework, right? That's one way it could happen. Another way that could be happening is she's killing it in her meeting. Meanwhile, the kid is throwing chocolate pudding at her face, right? That's another way that it could happen. Now, each of those have a kind of texture to them and a sort of way that they're happening. And you can imagine that's going to frame the emotional response to that, right? So think about how would you explain that? And I think what happens is oftentimes people will be like, oh, we know what's happening, but they don't necessarily. And your interpretation about how you see it happening and your ability to reflect that is critical. And then why, right? And the answer to why is not because there's coronavirus. The why, right, is like, well, why is she doing this conference call in this way? And again, you're looking for more things where, for her, yes, there are circumstances, but you want to understand all the ways that she could have done things and did them differently, right? So, why, let's assume she has a husband. Why didn't she have her husband deal with the kid, right? Is she trying to be a super mom? Is she trying to show that she can be a parent and a worker and, like, highly competent in this crazy over, like, kind of like over responsible, over stretched situation, think about the why. What's happening? What is she trying to do? Right? And how does that, all the texture of the situation that I mentioned, how does that give you clues into why this stuff is happening? Okay. All right. So, and then what you want to do is, let me go back. Think about the what should be fairly concrete. The hows can be, you can have more interpretations of them, but come up with a bunch of different whys. Maybe one why is that like she's trying to be super mom. Maybe another why is that like she, feels proud when she knows that she's going to be the breadwinner. Maybe she feels really competitive with her husband or her partner, right? And she wants to show that she can be the mom and the breadwinner. It's like, yes, double victory, right? Maybe that's something for her. But you want to try to think of different interpretations for what might be going on for her. And some of them will be weird. That's okay. All right, I'm going to skip this part. Okay, and just so you know, the person who developed this kind of thing is called Simon Sinek. He starts with why in the middle, and the thing, I like why as a way to get at this content, but I find that his way of talking about it feels more kind of like marketing BS to me, rather than an interpretation thing. So I've kind of inverted his tool to use it for this class, but I think it can be quite useful. And I hope that all of you will be able to use these tools, either the empathy map, tensions, contradictions, or surprises, and what, how, why. And I think like play with each of them and see which one kind of works for you. Okay. All right. I will see you all in class.